Dina does. I'm Dina, and I know a little bit about a lot, but I want to know more. So join me on this path to self-discovery. On today's podcast, we're talking codependency. And I have here with me my lovely friend, Terri Cole, who is a licensed psychotherapist and also the author of Boundary Boss, which is an amazing book for setting boundaries. And don't we all need to do that, Terri?
We so do, Dina. Thanks for having me.
And I'll also say, Terri, that you are 1/3 of the Dina's After Party. For those of you who know Terri from my background, Dina's After Party was a really fun thing we did while the Housewives season 6 was airing. We took the quote unquote behaviors that were showing themselves on each episode, and we kind of broke it down on a psychological level and worked through that with between me, you, and Lara, who I miss so much. I miss my New York crew so much. I love you guys.
Same. But this is a great way to get back together.
It is. And we also have our producer, Andy, here today, who's I always like to have a man's point of view. You know, we got to listen to them once in a while.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. Hi, Terri. Thank you for
Andy.
having me, Dina. I'm really excited.
You're going to learn so much today. We're all going to learn so much.
I want to be better at the end of this.
We will. We all will. And I will say, Terri, although we keep in touch, we live 3,000 miles away. We keep in touch with, some highs and social media and text. I have to say I have changed a lot, not only physically since the last time we hung together, but spiritually, emotionally, many different ways. And when I look back at, when we were working together last, I was very much although ironically, I was in a very powerful state, meaning like spiritually, I felt super strong. I should have been in the fetal position because I was going through a divorce. I was on this Housewives series at the time. There was a lot going on with my parents. There was a lot going on with my parents. And you certainly helped me through so much of that, including the reunion. You and Lara kind of sat with me and prepped me for that. But I have to say, looking back, I was very much in a victim mode then, and a blamey mode. And the path that I'm on today is self-awareness and realizing what part I play in every little single thing we do here on Earth as co-creators in the universe. And that's what you teach. What I love about you the most, and we're going to let you speak now, is you don't take anyone's bullshit. And that's where the growth happens. You can get a therapist who yeses you to death, and you can pay them the money and they'll take it at the end of the hour or whatever. But that's not you. You demand growth from your clients and through your courses. And that's why I adore you.
Oh, thanks, friend.
Yes. So I want to talk firstly about codependency, because for years, I thought it was something very different than what it actually is. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So why don't you give me the definition of codependency?
Well, according to Terri Cole, codependency is when you are overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, and the circumstances of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace or financial, physical, spiritual well-being. So the overly invested ones, and we know who they are.
We do. And a lot of us are them.
Yes. And I'm a recovering codependent myself. Trust me, I teach this. What do they say? You teach what you most need to learn. I was the most, and I was totally indiscriminate. I could become codependent with like my mail carrier. Like, I'm not kidding. I was overly involved in everyone's shit. Like I was, because I thought of myself like, I'm just a lover like that. I'm just kind of like Mother Teresa. I just want to help everybody. And then I really realized in therapy what it was. And at its core, codependency is an overt or covert bid to control the outcomes of other people.
Wow. Yeah, see, for years, I thought codependency was more dependency, where you become too dependent on someone. But now I'm realizing it is the codependency of that person who kind of controls and makes you dependent.
Right. But Dina, you're exactly why you and all my other clients, you're exactly why I coined a new phrase, because I thought that too, right? All of us thought Melody Beatty, codependent no more, got to be involved with an addict, I must be an enabler, or it's not codependency. So what happened is with all of my super high functioning female clients, which was most of my practice, if I saw codependent behavior and I pointed it out, they would be like, yeah, no, lady, you don't know what you're talking about. Everyone's dependent on me. I'm making all the dough. I'm making all the decisions. I'm the fixer in the crew. What are you talking about? And I was like, oh my God, my clients don't know what codependency is. So I renamed it high functioning codependency. And I talk about it in the book and I teach courses on it. In fact, I have a codependency course coming up in 2 days from when this is dropping. Oh. So if you're interested, just go to terricole.com/CC for crushing codependency. Anyway,
we will put this all in the show notes so everyone will be a click away from it.
Right on. So what ended up happening though with the high functioning codependency, how this is different is that it's really affects super capable women in particular, men as well. So Andy, I'm not leaving you out, but it really is something, and I'm more of an expert on the female experience. So we make it look easy, right? We are doing all the things for all the people. We are giving the money and doing the thing or whatever it is where we're over functioning. But because we're so capable, people don't see us as codependent and they don't realize that all of what we're doing is at the expense of our own health, mental well-being, physical well-being. So that is really codependency, and that's what high functioning codependency is.
Got it. Like I said, for years, I thought it was something different. And I kind of, speaking personally, I think I waver on both sides, where when it comes to my daughter, I definitely feel the need to control the outcome. And it was a very difficult lesson for me. And it's something that came very recently where I have to step away and realize this is her journey. And although I can give her advice on experience that I've had in my life, I can't control that outcome. And I think that's the hardest thing as a parent is to know that line, when you have to become, more of the, what do they say? Instead of the parent, you have to become the, I can't think of the word, but it's more like a consultant. That you can give it up, your advice, your experiences, but they don't have to take it. It's really hard.
It is, but here's the thing with the advice. You also, according to me, need to ask them if they want your friggin' advice because they don't have to want it, right? Yeah. I say to my adult kids, hey, I have a thought about that. Do you want to hear it? Most of the time they're like, sure. Sometimes they're like, I'm good. And then I'm not saying it because this is what shifted it for me. So I want you to think about it this way. When we think we have the answers for other people, we are centering ourselves in the middle of what is supposed to be their life. Mm-hmm. When what we want for our adult children is for them to be capable and for us to allow them to live their friggin' life. That means make mistakes. That means pull themselves up, fall down 800 times, get up 801, whatever. And when we go, well, what do you think you should do? When anyone comes to me for advice, the first thing I say before giving any advice is, well, let's start with what do you think you should do? What does your gut say? How are you leaning? Let's break that down. Asking all kinds of questions to help the other person get to their own answers because we don't know what anyone else should be doing. We don't, not even our grown children. And it's hard.
It's hard because you want to protect them from getting hurt. And I started talking a little bit recently about, I've been dabbling in plant medicine for the past few years. And I want to get your opinion on that. But I'm not saying that anyone needs to do this themselves, but for me, it's a tool to allow me to step aside outside of myself and get some answers and reframe certain things. Mm-hmm. And there was one time that I was in a journey, and this is where things really shifted. And Lex, when she's going to listen to this, I'm not making this whole thing about you. I just want to help parents out there because this is what helped me. When I start going into this, and sometimes it's just with plain meditation as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when I start, I kind of go by like sending love out from myself to my home, to my neighborhood, to the town, to the states. And then I kind of journey through the entire country, world, and visit especially family members, loved ones, friends, especially the ones I'm having a hard time with. I sit with them and send them love. Because the medicine is so beautiful and pure, it's a different kind of energy. And I got to Lexi and I couldn't see her face. Now she lives in California, so it was a close little journey. I couldn't see her face past 8 years old. And here I am in this journey. And I was like, why can't I remember what my daughter looks like? And I was freaking out. I couldn't see her adult face. And then when I came out of it, I realized I was still looking at her as that 8-year-old child. I was single, pretty much single mom, protecting her and doing everything, feeding, washed, everything.
Yep.
And it made me realize I was not looking at her as the adult that she's become. And I wrote her a text and I said, you know what, Lexi, I still look at you as this little girl I need to protect and not the beautiful young lady that you've mature, responsible young lady you've become. And I apologize for that. It was a huge shift for both of us. But I think many parents struggle with this. We're always looking at these kids as their little tiny faces and not the adults that they are. So do you have advice without having to do mushrooms to do that?
I do have advice, but I think that's really profound though, Dean, that having that realization that is like gold in that experience is deep, that changed your relationship with Lexi. So that is something that is super valuable, however you got there, right? It was something that was real and you took it with you when you came out of that experience. I think that for parents, we have to focus on ourselves. We get so used to when we're raising kids, our whole life is like, it's all about what do they need? What are we doing? We're organizing around their sports or their whatever it is they like to do and their friends and driving them friggin' everywhere. Like this is just our whole life is that. Having 3 boys, that's what it was, of course, until they were driving. And so there comes a point though, now you're in a different phase of life and there's a transition from a parent-child relationship to a grown child-parent relationship where we have to start having respect for our grown children's right to make their own decisions, to not be endless. Yes. And maybe they are, but here's the thing. My mother always had this thing on her fridge. It was like an Irma Bombeck quote. And it was like, I promise not to take credit for your successes if you promise not to blame me for your failures. And I was like, damn that. And I was like, I will take any day of the week, Mom. I will take that deal because I became who I became in life because my parents were like, good luck. We have faith in you. You're going to do it. Like nobody was like, you pay for your apartment. I was living in a friggin' laundry room. But all of those things made me scrappy and made me proud of myself. That's another thing that even when we make mistakes, there are mistakes to make. Yeah. How do we get the lessons if nobody lets us have the lessons or takes it personally? Like, why don't you take my advice? Because I want to live my own friggin' life is why. And I want you, Mom, Dad, Grandma, whoever it is, I want you to focus on your life and have faith that I will do what I need to do. I had a therapist who was so brilliant one time say to me, I was trying to control the shit out of one of my sister's lives. She was in an abusive relationship. I was like, what am I going to do? Right. I was like in my late 20s or whatever it was. And my therapist was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I'm trying to help her get out of this terrible situation. And she's living in a house with no fucking running water. And like, well, this guy's abusive. And she was like, let me ask you something. What makes you think that you know what your sister needs to learn in this lifetime?
Exactly.
And I was like, holy crap, I have no idea. I guess I don't. And I was like, wait a minute, though. So it's not my problem to fix. And she's like, no, And how presumptuous.
Yeah.
Like, who died and made you God that you think you know? She didn't say it mean like that, but she was like, think about that. Like you don't know. But I felt obligated. I didn't know I had a choice. She was like, Terri, that is your codependency. Do you know why you're doing this? And I said, no. And she said, because you worked all these years to create a pretty harmonious life, some internal peace. And your sister's disruptive life is disrupting your peace. You want it to be neat and in a bow and fixed, and you'll do anything to have that so you can go back to having peace. But you don't realize, because you're such a codependent, that you can have peace anyway. Stick to your side of the street. You love your sister, have faith. She's going to figure it out. So I was able to say to her, hey, I can't talk to you about this abusive relationship. I love you. If you ever want to get out, though, I'm still your person. 9 months later, she was like, hello, I want to get out. And I was like, I'm in my car. Literally, I'm in my car. She got sober, went back to school, and was never in a relationship like that again. But here's the thing, Dean. It wasn't because I saved her. It was because she saved herself. And that is what it must be, you know?
Let me ask you a question. Again, a lot of my journey right now is self-discovery. And like I said, realizing that everyone is a mirror for something inside of you. So when your sister was going through this, was there a moment that you considered there was a part of you that she was tapping on that needed to address a certain situation, whether it be self-respect, being in a relationship that was abusive or what have you? Where does that
It's interesting.
fall in?
My thought about the whole mirroring thing, I think that there's some truth. I don't think it's everything, though. I don't think every person you meet is doing that, because it just can't be. It's too complicated. What Jung says, and I agree with this, is that our shadow selves, right? When something really bugs the crap out of us about someone else and we're super judgy about them being greedy or selfish or self-centered, that a lot of times is the indication of our own shadow, disavowed parts of ourselves that we don't like because they don't really match with we call it ego dystonic, where they don't jive with our self-image. I don't want to see myself as greedy or as bitchy or mean or whatever the thing is. That makes total sense to me. And I use that to sort of check in with, what am I disavowing in myself? And listen, with my sister, we all come from an addictive family. So she was mirroring that. I was already sober, but sure. There are some similarities, but I find that the whole shadow work stuff is more relevant about what is someone else provoking in me when I'm being super judgy or gossiping about someone. I can usually go, do you really think that about yourself? And the answer is, yep. Got it.
There's so many layers. I'm realizing, especially with my husband and my daughter, the shadowing thing, the mirror thing, I kind of think some of us were co-journeyers with, and they're not meant to mirror you. It's just you're getting it right in this lifetime. Whereas like a friend who comes in, or somebody, a stranger or something, they're more the mirrors or the lessons. But I'm kind of realizing more and more your immediate circle is, Andy, do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The people that you're around, how that energy affects you and how it causes your highs and lows and what you see in other people and how you attract that. Absolutely. All day long.
Yeah. Right. It's like an energy wave.
Think about what Harville Hendrix says about this, though. So he wrote, Getting the Love You Want and a million other books. He's been doing this for 45 years. Anyway, he talks about that we attract people who will mirror our childhood wounds, right? Especially in romantic relationships. But that it's like the opportunity to actually heal them, like in a good relationship. In a crappy relationship, it's an opportunity, just speaking of all day long, to play out painful, repeating realities all day long. So it's interesting. I do think we're attracted to people for a reason, because we recognize them, right?
It's comfort, somewhere in a way.
Yes, they're familiar. You know, Dean, like you look and you go, unconsciously, this person is appropriate for mating material, even if you're not going to have kids with them, right? We're like, you are husband material, or you are the kind of friends I like. We recognize each other energetically, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, a million layers, and we could talk about this all day long, but I want to get back to the codependency thing. But with parenthood, I'm going to just add one more thing. It's funny because I'm trying to be less of a recovering or still in process codependent with Lexi, because I want to put this advice and I want to put this stuff on her. And then I have to say, no, what we just discussed, this is her journey. Sometimes she doesn't like it. Anyway, I was saying with Lexi, it's funny, like sometimes when I don't give her advice, and my husband, the same thing, they interpret as that, don't you care?
Mm-hmm. Right. But you're so right. Because when you change the dance, they're like kicking you in the shin to be like, I don't like the dance. And then you're like, hey, why aren't you doing the dance? You know what I mean? They want you to do the old move. But instead of the advice, what I did instead, because I couldn't say nothing, right? There was no way I was going to go from bossing everyone in the world around to being like, I have nothing to say. I then turned it into being supportive and asking like really questions, like getting into the inquiry of what they're doing, holding space for that person to do their thing, but asking questions like, what do you think? Because I didn't want to be
I love that.
not
we
engaged.
need to put that in
right?
the show notes. The question. First ask the question.
Yes. And I'll give you guys a list of really good, I have all this stuff in the book too, around how do you, instead of giving advice or saying nothing, because we're lovers, right? We don't want to say nothing. If the people we love are in pain or in struggling, we want to be a part of it in some way or support them in some way. And the way we thought was loving was codependent by saying what we think they should do. So now we learn, you know what, you know better, you do better. So now by asking questions, and then if, let's just say Lexi says to you, all right, Mom, so I told you what I think about it. I really want to know what you think. Have you had an experience like this? Then there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I did have an experience like this. This is what happened or worked for me. I don't know if it will work for you. I'm just telling you what my experience was. Again, having all of this respect for the other person's right to choose. Maybe she wouldn't choose, or maybe she will choose. But I'm not saying, because I think that people love these absolutes. They want to be like, Terri said, never, ever, ever give anyone advice. I'm like, hello, I never said that. I said, do not auto advice give and auto fix and be giving people unasked for advice and or criticism, because that's not having a relationship. That is about control. That is about codependency. So it's making the distinction between those two things.
Got it. I love you. This is what I mean.
It does make it sound so simple, doesn't it? It's like, oh, yes, of course. That's how it always should be. Terri, let me ask you this, because I understand codependence. I feel it in kind of a negative way when I feel negatively towards someone. I live a very codependent life with my wife. We own a business together and raise a bunch of children together. And when we have our lows, I feel like this is too much. We're too wrapped around each other. And when we have our highs, I can't get enough. And it's like everything that I want, and I want it more, and I want it deeper, and I want everything. So it seems to kind of flow with the highs and the lows, and finding that middle ground is the most difficult point. How do you manage that when you do have a very codependent life with somebody, or codependent in that we rely on each other to get through our day?
Well, here's the thing. What I was going to say is, I don't know if you and your wife are codependent, because you might be interdependent. You could be super close, run a business together. I spent a crap ton of time with my husband, and we are more interdependent, meaning we choose to be together. If one of us is better at something, then they do that thing. If the other one is better at something, then they do that thing. And we have all kinds of agreements around who's going to do what. So we're not fighting about stupid shit, but we are separate individuals in life with our own big careers, doing our own things. And then we come together, like you and your wife, like Dina and her husband, to create this super special, amazing thing that would never have existed in the world had we not gotten together. So when we look at codependency, real codependency, it causes friction. It causes pain. It's like one person really bidding to fulfill all the needs of the other person, trying to control all the things, even though you might do it in a passive aggressive way. So what you described, Andy, I almost think you're talking more about having a very close relationship with your wife, doing a whole ton of stuff together, including the business. But that doesn't necessarily mean, unless you are, listen, I don't know, when you're married, something bad happens to your person. It's really hard to not have it feel like it happened to you, right? Like we're in it. Like that's like being in the foxhole when you're married, if something really rough is happening to your person. But I'm super clear that if Vic is going through it, it is not happening to me. So I don't know, Andy, how are you with your wife? Do you feel like that piece of the relationship is codependent? Like if something bad is happening to your wife, does it feel like it's happening to you?
Oh, sure. I mean, I certainly, if she's having a bad day or if she's having a bad time, I definitely want to control that. I want to make it better. I want to have her think something different. I want her to see that it's not as significant as it is. I mean, all the things that you're saying, when the lows are there, I mean, those traps are definitely. Now, I sometimes try to avoid that, but I really do. I want to fix her. I want to fix her pain. I want to fix her troubles. I want that.
Yep. See, I think all of that is beautiful.
That's codependency, by the way.
Exactly.
I got it.
Dave and I have a relationship where he very much wants to fix everything and take care of everything. And that's his love language, along with gifts. He just wants to make it right. I'll fix it. Don't worry. He's a fixer. Mm-hmm. But the fine line is, I think people like that eventually, and I'm not saying my husband is like this, I'm just saying people like that eventually get a little angry that they're always fixing everything, that everything's on them. And the resentment kind of builds up. So they're creating it, but then on the other side, they'll use it against you.
Yes, and be pissed. Here's the thing about heterosexual couplings. Usually what I've seen for years working with couples as a therapist is that the woman wants to be understood, wants to be seen, and the man wants to fix your problem because he loves you and that's what he thinks. So usually, at least in my early times with my husband, I was like, here's the thing. I've had 3 careers before I even met you. So I don't know what makes you think you know what the fuck I should be doing, but you don't. And I don't need that from you, but I do need you to care that I'm upset. Right. So then he learned to just say, hey, babe, how can I best support you right now?
What do you need?
Hi, want to have sex? Great. Want to have a cup of tea? Fantastic. Give me a back massage? That would be amazing. Make dinner, whatever. So that is really helpful. But I do want to say about Dave, I think that is a very incredibly common desire. And it does come from love, but there comes a point where you got to go, do you want the person to fix it? I feel, and listen, I've had a lot of therapy, but if Vic is trying to fix anything for me, I'm like, no, man. But he adds value to my life without trying to control me. Like making food and making sure I have water and like always thinking of me, buying foods that I eat. Like he does all of that stuff. So that's it, love language too, right? Acts of service.
No, everything that Dave takes control of is stuff that I'm not good at, that overwhelms me, that really takes, because I'm so sensory overloaded most of my day.
Yep.
Especially techie stuff or, the bills, like he takes care of all of that because even the thought of it gives me hives.
Well, speaking of the techie stuff, I think we're going to take a moment to take a time out and I'm going to figure out what's going on with the recording thing. We'll come right back.
We were saying how Dave takes care of all the techie things. Like we just had a little technical difficulty here. And normally Dave would jump in and handle it. And I need him to do that. And it makes my life easier. So that's really, is that codependency or is that just partnership?
I actually think it's partnership because there are other things you do. I mean, I used to always say like, hi, I'm the emotional keeper of the entire family. Doesn't that count for something? Like
Oh yeah.
everyone,
He
I
knows
would
my
talk
witchy
to
ways
everyone.
are holding down it all. He knows.
It's true. We add value in different ways, but the whole resentment piece is the part that we need to look out for, though, because overfunctioners and overgivers and overdoers, like Dave, wanting to fix, and that all love. But there's got to be a point where wow, I'm getting to a tipping point where I'm kind of feeling resentful, because you don't want that. Like, I don't want to be on the receiving end of that. You don't want to, nobody does, right? Want to be on the receiving end.
A lot of women take that on, where they do everything and they take care of their families and they're this, they're that. And then they're miserable and they're bitching at their husbands that they take care of everything. So who's really hurting who?
Well, it's like the chicken or the egg too, where you go, I insist on doing everything, right? The overfunctioning, high functioning codependence, like, because no one's going to do it right. So there's that, right? So you're like, ugh, I can't even let them do it because they're going to do it wrong. But also you get to a point where, because we're giving from a dysfunctional place, when we're giving codependently, even if you're high functioning, people cannot be grateful enough. There isn't enough gratitude, because you're not giving from a place where their gratitude will touch it. You're giving from a place of fear, right? We're giving from a place of, we don't want to be rejected. We want to make ourselves essential. I mean, that was definitely my trip in my 20s for sure. I would just make myself so essential in the life of a boyfriend that he couldn't friggin' live with that. I was like, he can't leave me. He doesn't do anything. I do all the things. But again, that wasn't really me giving from a place of equanimity and love, let's say. Because if it was, I wouldn't have ended up feeling bitter about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's important
I've been so guilty of all of that, where I take on so much. That was my line. My dad pounded it into my head. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I would say that with my employees, in my marriage, everything. And then I would be resentful because I had to do everything myself. And I think that's something. What I'm learning now, again, especially with my family, and it's an adjustment for them because it's a different person, is I'm fixing me with all these different things, hoping that energetically that makes a shift in whatever is they're struggling with as well. Because we as women, and Andy, I'm sorry again, Andy kind of walks out sometimes when I get on this women thing, but we are powerful and we are able to do, in my opinion, a lot more than men can do and juggle at the same time. That's why we were the ones with the tubes to give birth, we're able to do all these things. It's the fine line of doing them from a healthy place, like you said, and taking care of you first, not draining yourself, and allowing others to take from the overflow.
That though, Dina, is probably the most important part of this whole conversation about codependency and stopping it. Like, how does someone watching this, listening, how do they stop doing it? The first step is awareness, right? You're aware. You're like, wow, I just saw myself in that description. That's me. Okay. So that's super important to know that it's you. And then really questioning. If you want to know who you're codependent with or where you're codependent, just do a resentment inventory, and you'll find all the places where probably a boundary is needed or a boundary is being crossed. And we know, we know where we feel resentful. You both could write a list right now, Andy and Dina. And even if there were only two people on it or two situations, it doesn't even have to be the people close in your life, but it's a place where you haven't spoken up, right? Or you haven't set a limit on something, or you haven't told the person how you really feel about something. And all of those things, according to me, fall under the category of healthy boundaries. Exactly. Being able to talk about that,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's another thing, again, that looks very different for the people who love me, is setting boundaries. Whereas before, again, I unintentionally allowed these boundaries to be crossed because I felt the need to make it right. So now boundaries may sometimes look like, again, not caring, or it's a very fine line. So talk to me about how you can set a boundary with someone you're very close to without two things. And I'm going to speak personally on this. making them feel like you don't care. And also a lot of us deal with, again, childhood wounds of abandonment. How do you not tap that abandonment wound while setting a healthy boundary?
First of all, you might tap that wound, but as long as you don't abandon the person, it'll just be a tap and not a gouge, right? Like the other person might be sensitive to what you're saying, but you can always set boundaries with kindness, with love, if it's appropriate, with a little more fire if needed. And I think that there's myths that if you are setting healthy boundaries, you're being mean, you're being aggressive, you're saying no all the time, rejecting people, and none of that is true. So if you want to set a boundary with someone you're very close to, and you think it might be something that is going to tap on something painful, you say, hey, I want you to know how much I love you. And you know that I'm changing and evolving. And normally, and back in the day, I would go to Vegas with you. Let's just say, I don't know. But where I am now.
I can't believe you said that.
Well, that was literally just
no, and Dina going to Vegas with Dave is like the ultimate act of love, because there is almost no circumstance that Dina will go to Vegas.
Only for Dave.
That's amazing. So funny you said that.
That's so weird. I literally had no idea, but I also, being an empath and a highly sensitive person, Vegas is literally the last place on earth you ever want to go. So let's just say you, instead of saying yes, in that moment you were going to set a limit because you were feeling overwhelmed emotionally. You can say, listen, I love you. You know, when I can get it up to do the Vegas thing with you, I do, because you love it and it makes you happy. And I love you. And yet right now I'm so compromised that I really don't feel like I can. So I'm going to need to set a limit and not go to Vegas. So we can compromise. If you want to postpone the trip for 2 weeks, I think I could probably do it then, or go and have a great time and just know that I'm here tending to what I need to tend to. The person may want you to change your mind. And really, we're not talking about you and Dave. I'm just talking about a scenario. Like if the person says, I can't believe you're saying no, you're so selfish, that's so mean, or whatever. If they say anything like that, you can say, hey, I see that you're upset. And I am sorry that you're upset. And yet I need to do this. This is a boundary I have to draw for myself. So I know it's hard, but I really need you to respect it and just know that I love you. And sometimes we're going to disagree, and sometimes you're going to be disappointed with what I decide. But my job is to decide what's best for me. And most of the time when we're together, we compromise, we decide we do it together. But in this situation, I really can't, babe. I really can't.
Yeah. It's funny. And Dave, I know you're going to listen to this, and I love you. And this is not about you. I'm just from experiences, I get to draw things, obviously. And one thing that really helped us is that exact line is because Dave, his story, which is true, is his dad left when he was younger. So he has some abandonment issues. And I have learned our fighting style needed to change a little bit because I withdraw, when I'm upset. And that taps on his abandonment wound big time. And I've learned to say, I will be back, but I need this space. So it's those little micro changes in communication that really make the biggest difference, I find.
But that's major, Dina. Like it sounds like a micro change, but think about life. What is life? It is the everyday things that we do. It's some peak experiences, but most of life is, how do I negotiate this interaction with this person that I love so much while respecting myself and what I need, and treating them with love and care. And that's exactly what you do when you say, right now, I need space. I promise I'll be back. Give a squeeze, kiss a face, kiss a hand, kiss a lip. Let the person know. And the more you do that, the more reinforced it is that you taking time for yourself is part of your style of self-care when there's conflict, and that you will be back. Because now suddenly there's 1 time, 2 times, 10 times, 20 times where the person is like, oh yeah, she's definitely coming back because I have all of this evidence that she's coming back. But it takes that shift And it takes that communication. So good job.
Well, Terri, what about the idea? And I'm just saying this, maybe I'm defending Dave a little bit here. I don't know. But it is a negotiation, and that's part of a relationship, and part of doing things for the other person sometimes is doing things you don't want to do. So, you're talking about these points in time where you have to really lay down the law. I can't do this. It really would defy who I am as a person. It's that negotiation, because sometimes I feel like if I'm getting a no, or even if I'm the one giving the no, I'm accused of being unreasonable and hypocritical, and you asked me to do this. And, I feel bad sometimes in that regard, because I don't know if it's a negotiation or a hard line.
Okay. So the question is, when is it appropriate to draw a boundary for ourselves? Because we're in long-term relationships. And yes, it is about compromise, but there also needs to be respect for what the other person knows about themselves. With my husband and I, if he wants me to do something, or if I want him to do something, we always say, how important is this to you? And if he's like, I really want you to come, I'm like, done. I can't wait to get dressed up. I'm going. It's going to be amazing. If he doesn't need me to, and he knows I'd kind of rather not, he's not mad. He's not offended. He goes, oh no, it's going to be all illustrators. You don't have to go. It's fine. Because he trusts that I want to be with him, because I married him. So he doesn't feel insecure, So I think that there's got to be mutual respect for each other. And there is a negotiation. What you're saying, Andy, there's a point to that. And I think that a lot of people who are conflict averse do not want to have a negotiation, because they feel incredibly threatened by that. So again, every situation is unique to itself. So if your wife says to you, Andy, I really want you to do this thing, and you're like, I really don't want to, then you have to say, I know a couple who says, everything they do, they talk about it on a scale of 1 to 10. They're like, so what is it? If the wife says it's an 8, he's probably going to do it. And they tell the truth. If the wife says it's a 4, he's probably not. So you have to, be trustworthy if you use a system like that, right? To not say everything is a 9, but there's ways to, because it matters to me and it should matter to each other. And not every boundary we create, not every situation is the same. So if Vic says to me, this is important because, I'm like, I don't even need the reason. You just said it's important. I'm so there. Because I know if it's not important to him, he'll let me off the hook for things that he knows I would rather not go to the symphony or whatever the thing is,
Got it. If you had to give your top 3 points on most important boundaries in your life, as far as, is it with a boss? Like, what is going to really change your life? A boundary with a spouse, a boundary with a parent, a boundary with your boss? What is the first one you need to attack? Or is it something that needs to be like all at once?
It's different, because it's for all the people. So the first thing is people who immediately say yes to things. So we just have to stop the auto yesing in life, where you can
people
say
pleasing.
Yes. That creates the most disordered boundaries, so much resentment, hating all the people in your life because you're over giving to all the people that you don't want to be. So, and a lot of the times it's just an automated behavior. We just learned people need help, we should help them, or people want us to do something, we should do it. So I feel like the most powerful thing people tell me from the book and the courses is learning these other phrases. So the moment someone asks you to do something, I want anybody listening or watching this for the next 48 hours, just no instant answers to anyone unless it involves minor kids. No instant answers. Every person, we start to train them that maybe you need to think about it. And you can say, okay, I need to check with Dave. I'll get back to you in 2 days.
I guess I phrased my question wrong. I was looking for somewhere to start. Like a spouse or child is like a big
yes, you're correct.
Should I start with friends and saying no to them and setting boundaries, and it will make it easier for me to do it with my boss, and then I'll make it easier to do, is that
I say start with non-priority people. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
No, I praised you.
Non-priority, non-priority people is who we start with. So that's the hairdresser, that's the mailman, that's the, the salad comes
my
and it's wrong
hairdresser's
instead
priority.
of being. Actually, mine too. Mine's in my VIP section. I would not start with her. All right.
No, but that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Like the ones that won't crush your soul as much, to say no.
Yes. And it's not just saying no. It's literally expressing your preference, right? So much with boundaries, the way that I determine what they are, my definition is that it's really your own personal rules of engagement that you're letting other people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And that means you have to know your preferences, your limits, and your deal breakers, like your non-negotiables. And you must be able to communicate them with transparency. And that's where a lot of people have problems, because they know them and they think them, but then they don't say them. And then they're like, I don't know, Betty's so entitled. She's such a jerk. And you're like, is Betty a jerk? Is Betty entitled? Or are you just not telling Betty the truth about that you don't want to go to her baby shower or whatever the thing is,
And this is what your book speaks to. And you could learn so much from it. And I've learned so much from you. And thinking back when we worked together 10 years ago, I wasn't hearing you a lot. Now I hear you loud and clear. And it's part of the resistance of growth. Sometimes you're not ready to grow, or you need to go through a different experience or what have you. But things that you've said to me, moving away from my last marriage, now I was like, I wasn't hearing her. I was listening to the words, or maybe I was hearing you. I wasn't listening is the right way to say it. But now when you're ready, you know what it is. And I like your book because it breaks it down with the no bullshit attitude that you have, that I love you so much for, that really makes you look at yourself and say, like, where could I be more responsible for this exchange? And
what's my 50%? That's right. That's what you're always asking. Mm-hmm. What is my 50% of this interaction? Because even if someone else is acting awfully, your 50% is staying, right? Your 50% is engaging, right? Exactly. Allowing it, not leaving, or not getting in your car and getting away until the person calms down, or whatever the thing is. So you're right. It's understanding that. But quickly, I want to say something about the 10 years ago. Your evolution, what's happening is that you've evolved so much personally and healed so much in the past decade that everything you look at now, you will see from that vantage point. So a lot of what we talked about 10 years ago, you're ready now, and you've already incorporated it into your knowledge. Like, you get it now. And that's why they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. What really happens when the student is ready, what the teacher said a decade ago makes sense. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
We're so condescending of our former selves, but we needed to do that to get where we are today. What can a man take away from your book?
Well, understanding all of the secret and unconscious crap that goes on in the minds of women, that's one thing. And how to just avoid the whole fixing everything. There are so many things that I talk about in the book that just people talk about over and over again, of how to communicate effectively. It's not like the man is the one doing the wrong thing. It is the couple, right? It's 50% in a heterosexual thing, 50% the man, 50% the woman. And I think that having a deeper understanding, of your own boundaries, even though it's written more towards women, it's the same thing. Because a lot of men learn to be people pleasers too. That's not only for women. And then men have layers and layers of other issues that have been put upon them by society. Women, we were taught to be good girls, raised to, make sure everyone else has what they need, smile, turn that frown around, don't be a troublemaker, don't stir the pot. I could keep going, I won't. But then boys are raised to don't cry, be independent, stand up for yourself, be a leader, don't be a pussy, don't, like, all of these things that take a man and a boy and a teenager away from their own feelings. So nobody teaches at all boys. And maybe it's different now. I hope it is. But about feelings and about that how you feel matters. It's not just what you do. And I feel like with men, a lot of times you are just indoctrinated into this, get it done, all about work, not about how you feel. But it is just as much for you about how you feel as it is for your wife. And it needs to be that, at least in a marriage where there's equality, sort of, you know what I mean? Where you're not really playing out these old roles.
Well, I think what a lot of the times what happens, and this is what we're talking about, I keep on mentioning in all of my different modalities of healing, is the balance of masculine and feminine, and where to like start from the beginning with it. And I really want to reach like young women and men with this podcast, because the sooner you realize how important that balance is, the better off your relationships will be. Because a lot of women, especially from my background, Italian women, were more submissive, let the man be in charge, take control. But as they grow and heal from these wounds, from these little girls, were told to be seen and not heard and be polite and everything. As they grow and they come into their own, that's when the resentment starts. And that's why divorce is so high, because they married a different girl. Now she's a woman, and now she wants to be balanced with you. And these men who come from a place of ego, because that's what they were programmed to do, are like, what happened to that girl that I could take care of, control, keep in this box? And, you know, men take a little longer to get to that balance, but we're working, it's happening faster these days. And it's more acceptable these days to be in your feelings, to work with some of these feminine energies in your business, in your personal life. Before it was, you know, frowned upon. Now, with the spiritual awakening that's happening, it's expected. And that's where the balance in the yin and yang is really coming into play, is the sooner you could recognize that and not be that helpless little girl and stand in your power in partnership from the beginning. I think that's what makes a marriage last long. And, you know, Dave and I have found, and I said this, I think, when I spoke to Ophi, that instead of going to marriage counseling, which I think every healthy and unhealthy couple should go to therapy or some kind of therapy. So we started from the beginning just to make sure that, you know, we're on the right track. But we found working on ourselves separately is making things more harmonious together.
Yep. Because you're dealing with your own stuff, right? When you work separately, you're dealing with your crap, your injuries, your inner child. Your partner's doing the same. Then we can come together, and we're not only bringing like our childhood stuff into the room, even though we are, but we're working on what's best for this unit, meaning that the client, when you go to marriage counseling, is the marriage. It is the unit. It's not one of you, and it's even not you guys as individuals. It is the unit. At least that's what I think it is.
And that's why I like listening to you, because you're not only an amazing therapist, psychotherapist, and author and everything else, but you're in a really healthy relationship. And that speaks volumes about me wanting to aspire to be, you know, I mean, there's nothing better than two powerful people coming together in harmony. And I think that's what's happening in this world right now, is the balance of both things. So for those of you listening and thinking about taking, you know, one of your courses or getting your book, you really got your shit together in all ways. And that's why your word is golden to me, Terri.
Wasn't always true, but is now. If people want to, if people are interested in the codependency course, they can go to terricole.com/CC, and you can really get the book anywhere. But if you want the bonuses, go to boundarybossbook.com. Thank you guys so much for having me. I love this, and I can't wait to come back and talk about all the things, like all of them.
Yes, we are going to talk about all things. And I am, for those of you watching, I'm puffy this week because we lost Grandma Wrinkles, and I've been crying all week. And I want to talk to you, maybe have you on again and talk about grief, because Grandma's death not only had me mourning for her, but it again hit those wounds of grief that I didn't realize I have not worked through yet. So there's so many layers to healing. There's so much of it. And this is why we're doing this podcast, is to give you all the tools. And someone may resonate with you more than others. Use that. Go with that feeling. You're definitely the master of boundaries and codependency. And I hope to have you on from time to time so we can work through some more psychotherapy.
I am here for all of it, Dean. You guys, thank you so much. Thanks, Andy. It was nice meeting you. And I will see you guys again.
All right. Love you.
Love you too, baby.